My name's Carol. I'm so used to saying that in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. My name is Carol, and I'm grateful to be here, and I am an alumni from the Hope House. I love the Hope House, and I love each and every one of you. I've been praying all week. It's just been kind of weepy all week because the profound life change that happened to me because all of your hands and feet and the love of God that you guys all put forth every day has made my life what it is today, and I have an amazing life today. So I wrote something, and I just wanted to say it's such an honor to be here on the National Day of Prayer, and really what an absolute honor it is to be standing here at all, because I know that I'm a miracle. Because if it had not been for a loving God and the prayers of many people like you, all your loving hands and feet, I wouldn't be standing here today. I'm clear about that. I would be a statistic in the report that says that women like me with a history like mine have no hope for recovery. I know what it's like to be lost and without hope and in darkness. I lived in that place for a very long time. When I first came to the Hope House in 2000, I knew very little of the power of God. In fact, I knew nothing of Him. But what I did know is that a few days earlier, I'd given birth to a little boy at Stanford Children's Hospital. It was there that God spoke into my life and made Himself known to me. I'd given birth to a little 5-pound son, and he had been removed from my custody because I was an unfit mother. My son was born full of drugs, and his newborn body had to struggle to do what should be easy and natural for him. He had trouble swallowing and breathing, and he had tremors, and I had done that to him. It was an excruciating, pain-filled time. But I was not unfamiliar. I was very familiar with that pain because I had used drugs and alcohol almost all my life, and the consequences had always been severe. I had 2 older sons, both of whom I had lost parental custody to years before, and it was just as painful then as well. I always medicated my pain by stuffing my feelings inside a drink or filling a needle full of drugs and slamming it down my arm, and things always got worse. They never got better. Here I was again in a mess I couldn't fix or undo. What would I do this time? What could I do? A woman at the hospital told me there was a chance that I could perhaps get my baby back. I asked her how, and she told me I'd have to stop using drugs and alcohol, and that included alcohol, and I'd have to prove myself, not just for a day or two, but for as long as the court ordered me to. So now I knew she may as well have told, now I knew the answer, but she may as well have told me to move a mountain simply by waving my hand, because I knew in my gut I couldn't do it. For a seasoned, lifelong addict like me, I knew it was impossible. For the first time I knew in my innermost self that I was an addict of the worst kind, and I was willing to admit that. And it was the first time I had ever been able to admit that. I wanted to be reunited with my son, but I could not live without using. Drugs and alcohol were my master. There's a line in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that says it's darkest just before the dawn. Well, it was very dark before the dawn of my new life's beginning. And as I sat there in utter despair and complete hopelessness, God spoke into my life and He told me 2 words. I know. And I knew He knew. I knew He knew everything. I knew He knew my pain, my sorrow, my guilt, my remorse, my regret, and my absolute powerlessness. God gave me a vision in my mind, and He showed me a crossroads with 2 paths, and I was free to choose either one. There was a path that I always rocked to on the far right, and it was far and away from him, and I could choose to go down that path if I wanted, but I didn't hold the chance that I might see my sons again. And I had the freedom to choose the one I had never walked in, and it was to my right. Well, I thought for a few minutes before I made my decision, and I threw up my hands, and I chose the path that I had never traveled on before, the one that God held His hand out to me. Well, guess where God brought me from there? He took me to the Hope House. And if I spent every day for the rest of my life telling others how grateful I am for the Hope House and how important and what an impact it's made on my life, it would not nearly be enough. They say you only have to change one thing when you're in recovery, and that's everything, especially your thinking. I had a lot of work to do. I had been using drugs and alcohol since I was very young. I used it to manage my unmanageable life. I had a severe eating disorder as a young girl, and I would binge and purge anywhere from 3 to 20 times a day. Alcohol and drugs were my solution, but they quickly turned on me, and then I had a threefold addiction that would plague me for over 37 years. First, I would have to begin to trust a little bit. I had so many secrets, it was hard for me to remember what the truth was. There were things I had never shared with a single human being ever, like my bulimia. In 37 years, I've lived with a deep, dark secret that I never thought I would ever share with another human being, but I had to if I was to get free. I had to learn to cast out old thinking and old ideas and begin to develop new ways of thinking and looking at myself and others and the world around me. I learned that selfishness and self-centeredness were at the root of my problem, and that one day at a time I could learn to turn from a life that was all about me to a life that was centered around God and others. Nothing in my life would change unless I first changed my thinking, and that is not something that happens overnight. I often laugh when I talk to the women of the Hope House now and I share with them. I tell them if you're lucky enough to come to the Hope House, you're going to get your master's in recovery. I say this lightheartedly, but also wholeheartedly because it's true. While I was in the Hope House, I began to grow and be nurtured a little, and little by little the lights began to come on. Sometimes I didn't see it at first, but as the years have passed, I look back and I know that there's not a microsecond that I spent in that Hope House that wasn't absolutely necessary. I needed it all. I don't know which day or which lesson was the most life-changing. Was it the time that Karen talked to me in her office and she told me that it was impossible to recover unless you worked an honest program? Was it her looking at me in the eyes and telling me that I could trust the process when I was so scared I wanted to scream and run and give up? Or perhaps it was when I would hear Rudy say, one day you're going to go from seeing things in black and white, then they're going to be in Technicolor, Carol, if you don't give up. Or was it the time I spilled out my deepest, darkest secret to her, and she told me that there was nothing that was impossible to change by working those 12 steps of recovery? Was it when Mike Nevin smiled at me and said he was rooting for me, and he gave me a big hug, and he told me he was proud of me? I could see that my life mattered to him. Was it when Janet said she thought I was going to make it because I had an attitude of gratitude? Even though I couldn't see it, all I knew was I was scared to death and everyone petrified me. But I had to believe that she was saying was true, even when I couldn't see it for myself. Maybe it was when Naomi took us to Glide Memorial Church to serve, and we went to the church service, and I felt the spirit of a living God as the people were singing songs of praise. And I knew what they were talking about when they said, don't quit before the miracle. This was the miracle. Was it the day when I got to go to the dentist for the first time so I could get some teeth and I could smile without covering my mouth in shame? Was it when Marcia Howard, our awesome parenting teacher, had us all describe to each other how we saw each other, and she described me as a cool, refreshing glass of iced tea? That was not how I felt about myself. How could it be that a mom who had deserted all of her children could be called a cool glass of iced tea? Or was it when she taught us that we didn't have to be raised with killer phrases like our parents had raised us? Phrases like, you'll never amount to nothing, or why can't you ever, or what's the matter with you? That we could stop that kind of talk to ourselves and never talk to others like that either, especially our children. Or maybe it was Reverend Fraser picking me up for church and preaching at our service one time. If you all knew how good God was, you'd shout from the top of every rooftop that God is good. And I wondered to myself as I sat in her service, will I ever want to climb to the top of the roof and shout that? Or perhaps it was two sweet little old women who used to come and teach us needlepoint and tell us that they were and told me they were alcoholics just like me. They blew my mind when they leveled the playing field by sharing their experience strength at home and telling me that they were once just like me. I don't know which day it was or which experience it was. It was not in part, but rather in whole. It was 1,000,001 people giving of themselves freely every day in every way that showed me the love of God and the pathway to recovery one day at a time, one thought at a time. I began the metamorphosis of change from an earthbound caterpillar into a pretty, beautiful butterfly. One day I was sitting on the couch of the Hope House, and I was looking through the photo albums of all the women who had been there over the years before me. And as I looked through the pages, I saw a woman who had been a volunteer at the Hope House. And this woman was someone I knew well one time. She was my mom. She couldn't help me in my addiction, and I had never known she had been at the Hope House. But she had come and donated her time and her resources to the woman at the Hope House 10 years before I ever got there. She died when I was in my addiction. I wonder if she was there, that she prayed for me, that maybe one day I would be in that Hope House too. I wonder if she prayed for my children and her grandchildren, that maybe one day they would be healed when their mom got well. Well, if she did, her prayers were answered, because not only was I led to the Hope House, but my son Gabriel was released to the custody of the Hope House on March 15th, 4 months after I had arrived there. And March 15th just happened to be my mom's birthday. I stayed at the Hope House for almost a year, and it was one of the most profound and life-changing years of my life. And let me tell you, I got my master's of recovery. My recovery only began there, but I got a foundation to begin building upon there. And it has been 12.5 years since I first crossed the threshold of the Hope House doors. Since then, I've remained clean and sober and active in recovery. I regained full custody of my son, Gabriel Thomas Sheldon, almost 2 years later, and I've been able to be a good woman to him. I think a picture is worth 1,000 stories when it comes to recovery. And I want to tell you one of the best pictures to all my sons sitting over there at that table in my beautiful home. I don't think I probably have to tell you how grateful I am. I hope it shows. I hope it emanates from me. I am grateful. Not one thing you have all ever done has gone to waste, and I want you to know that. I'm living proof of that. I want to thank Karen for keeping the dream alive. Because there's so many times that when life has been hard too, I've thought of her and her work that she does nonstop. And it's kept me going some days when the going's hard. And to all of you who give generously and without ceasing, to be the hands and feet of God here on earth. I have continued to return to come to the Hope House and give back in every other area of my life. I have cleaned up the wreckage of my past and paid all my debts. I have also been a good mom to my kids, and I've been able to be there for them. And today, I get to be a prayer warrior that gets to ask God to save other women like He saved me, and to give Him, and to give each and every one of them everything that He gave me and more. I will give without ceasing every day of my life until I don't have any breath left in my body. Thank you.